Often, there are villains who we sympathize with, because once we know who they are, their motivations and their stories, we can no longer look at them in terms of black and white, right or wrong. James Craddock, the Gentleman Ghost, is certainly one of those villains. Known by several names throughout his history, the Ghost, Gentleman Jim, and notably the Gentleman Ghost, Craddock's tale is one that is woven into the fabric of a founding member of the Justice Society of America, that of Hawkman. And even though his first appearance in 1947 pitted him against Hawkman, it would not be until 2006 and 2007 when we finally get the answer as to why the Gentleman Ghost does what he does and is who he is. Welcome back to the Comicverse, everyone. Today we will be going all the way back to 1947 to relive Jim Craddock's first ever appearance in comics, and then leap ahead to the 21st century to understand the madness behind this spectral nemesis. But before we begin, we'd appreciate it if you like and subscribe, comment, and share this video out. It really helps out the channel each and every week. Thank you. Issue number 88 of Flash Comics from 1947 contains a story simply titled The Ghost, and this is where we begin. The law enforcement of 5 continents could not stop him. It seemed there was a specter from beyond the grave committing crimes across several countries. In Paris, a rare gem exhibit was stolen from a museum, a bank vault in Rome, another in London, all credited to the Ghost, sometimes the crimes occurring within minutes of each other. In Geneva, an art heist, the only witness, a man who saw nothing but heard the laughter of a disembodied soul, a laugh he will never forget. And yet, it continued. Both Lisbon and Sydney were not immune from the crime spree. Meanwhile, in the United States, Carter Hall, aka Hawkman, is in his study catching up on work, a suggestion from his girlfriend Shiera, otherwise known as Hawkgirl. Later that night, Shiera tries to convince Carter to go to Europe and investigate the Ghost, even though she was the one who told Carter he needed a break from crime fighting. To her, the Ghost is no ordinary criminal. Carter flips a coin to decide. Heads they go, tails they stay. A few hours later, Hawkman and Hawkgirl are descending over London. Hawkman believes the Ghost is very cocky for a criminal, even going so far as to taunt the police by reporting his crimes before they even happen. Tonight, he has threatened to rob the Avon Bank. Shiera thinks it's a diversion. Hawkman believes the Ghost means what he says, and as the two heroes arrive at the bank, the Ghost's men are exiting the Avon Bank with satchels full of money. From the darkness of the rooftops, Hawkman and Hawkgirl drop down on the robbers, and the crooks turn their guns to open fire. It does not take much for our heroic duo to disarm and defeat the Ghost gang. As the cops arrive to congratulate the two, another voice is heard ringing through the air. It demands that Hawkman and Hawkgirl stand down, or else Hawkgirl will be the next target. The voice then instructs the men to pick up the cash and take Hawkgirl as prisoner. This will ensure that Hawkman behaves, and that the Ghost will continue to have his full and undivided attention. The last thing Hawkman sees of his other half is Shiera being shoved into a car and driven off. As the police vainly rush after the car on foot, Hawkman realizes that the Ghost himself did not get into the car, which means he must still be around the bank, and Hawkman is right. But did he really expect to see a ghost? The voice rings out again, this time laughing at Hawkman, and it was coming from the bank stairs. As Hawkman rushes over to investigate, 5 minutes go by, and he realizes the Ghost hasn't laughed since. Nothing more. He examines the area and finds a wired recorder, and when he plays the tape, it is the same voice, the same laugh. The message this time, the Ghost speaking directly to him. I knew you were in London, Hawkman. I knew also you wouldn't be fooled, that you would show up here tonight. So I dreamed up this little gadget. One of my men pulled a wire that set it in operation. Goodbye, till we meet again. A few minutes later, Hawkman searches the area for more clues. Like the Ghost, he too was planning ahead. Hawkman had already spread fluorescent powder where the getaway car was parked. Now, with the aid of a UV light, he can track the tire treads as easily as following traffic signs. The trail ultimately leads Hawkman to the Tower of London, the infamous medieval prison built by William the Conqueror. Now, it's a tourist stop, a museum, a perfect hiding spot for a ghost. Meanwhile, in the bloody tower itself, Hawkgirl is tied to a chair, next to a desk where we get our first glimpse of the Ghost. A stovepipe hat, a monocle, a cloak, in 18th century fashion, all in ghastly white, except his face. There's nothing there. Instead, just empty air. But still, the ghost speaks. He tells his men that it is time to pull their biggest job yet. But first, they must dispose of the feathered beauty. She knows too much. Outside, Hawkman has made it to the window and can see inside. He can see the gun raised to Shayera's head, and he can hear the ghost demand that they remove her mask to know her identity before she is removed from this mortal coil. For Hawkman, there is no time left to wait. Hawkman surprises the ghost and his men through a trap door. One of the men lands a lucky punch, snapping the harness that holds his wings. Hawkman is now grounded, but he is not out of the fight. Not yet. The ghost knows this too and tells his men to use their hostage instead of fighting against a veteran hero. As Hawkman swings a mace he pulled from the exhibit, the goon holding the gun to Hawkgirl's head tells him to stop, or else no more girlfriend. But Hawkgirl is not useless. She manages to raise her legs and shove the goon in Hawkman's direction, giving her boyfriend a clean shot at the jaw, which is all he needs. As Hawkman unties Hawkgirl, she pleads with him to forget her, to go after the ghost. But Hawkman's only reply? What ghost? There is no ghost. All it was? Wiring holding up the ghostly outfit and another tape recorder under the seat. The recorder and microphone speak as Hawkman disassembles the ruse. Very smart, Hawkman. You even the score now. Hawkman rips apart the wiring so the ghost cannot hear them talk anymore. He tells Hawkgirl that when he was outside, he noticed wiring leading from this tower to the belfry. That must be where the ghost is hiding out. A moment later, Hawkgirl descends to the entrance of the belfry as Hawkman goes to the top. Now they have the ghost trapped. Nowhere to run. And as Hawkman reaches the top, the ghost, clinging to one of the giant bells, yells out his name. Hawkman tells him that his ghostly tricks and gadgets cannot hide his masquerade any longer. Hawkman dives down on his foe, demanding that he give up. Cannot escape, but the ghost reminds him, you cannot catch a ghost, as he slides down a pulley to a support beam, where Hawkman lands to meet him. Hawkman reveals that he knows he is not a real ghost, but our villain responds, those gadgets and tricks are merely for his amusement. Suddenly the support beam gives way under their weight, and the ghost falls into the blackness of the tower's pit. Hawkman warns Shayera to be careful, that the ghost is falling. In a rush, Hawkman reunites with Hawkgirl at the bottom. She tells him no one fell, but she did find a movie projector. She shows him the image of the ghost swinging from the bell. Hawkman then realizes he was fighting an illusion. But if that were so, what happened to the ghost? Maybe he really is a specter from beyond the grave. Hawkman receives his answer. The ghost's voice rings out once more to tell him goodbye for now, Hawkman, and lets out a haunting laugh. Thus ends the Gentleman Ghost's first ever comic book appearance, but it would not be long before he reappears in Flash Comics number 104. However, his next evolution in his story takes us to 2006, the post-crisis era, in JSA issue number 82, and a story arc that would span 6 books, as well as finally tell the tale of James Craddock and how he actually became a paranormal villain in the DC universe. We open our tale with the Gentleman Ghost stealing precious gems from a Metropolis vault. Only this time, instead of Hawkman, he is interrupted by the Man of Steel himself. As Superman tries to capture the spirit, the Gentleman Ghost blasts him with hellish fire from his cane, giving him time to dissipate and get away, all the while taunting the gray-haired protector of Earth, calling him an old man, and leaving him a polite note. With thanks for your hospitality, your servant, the Gentleman Ghost. With his heist interrupted Metropolis, the Gentleman Ghost decided to try another city, this time Gotham, specifically the library of Bruce Wayne, where he finds a rare and old collection of Shakespeare's completed works. And as he loses himself in the printed page, the Batman arrives and thwarts his crime. As the two do battle, the Gentleman Ghost is able to escape once again using smoke and theatrics. Next, he arrives at a warehouse full of precious relics. His men help him uncrate the items, but as they do, a strange sensation fills the air, and with no one in sight, his men begin to fall down, as if hit with an invisible force. This is something the Gentleman Ghost does not like very much at all, and he begins to flee. But as he rides his spectral horse out of the building, he is caught in the lasso of truth held by Queen Diana, Wonder Woman herself. However, Wonder Woman notices something is off. The lasso of truth compels truth, not pain. but the gentleman ghost is in agony. Still, he will not answer to her. He disappears once again, leaving Wonder Woman behind to ponder where he went. And this encounter is what triggers the memories. The need for the ghost to tell his painful truth, his painful tale, who he really is. Spread out over 5 more issues, we will piece it together until we have the full picture. James Craddock's earliest memory is that of a carriage ride on the King's Road, under the cover of darkness. His mother and father, unwed, on their way home to his father's noble estate, until the horses stop. James's father orders his bastard son and mistress out onto the muddy trail. After all, James's grandfather will be home from war soon, and he will not find these 2 lower creatures sleeping on his linens, lest they all be disowned. And that is the first time James felt the slop of the mud between his toes. And that is the beginning of his life to be. James's mother would find work in a pub, where Jim's anger and outlook on life began to take hold. He fought, he stole, he ordered around those he thought lower than he. He refused menial labor. After all, his father, estranged as he was a gentleman, and he would be one too. It was his legacy. But James's behavior got his mother and himself kicked out, back onto the King's Road. But that was all right for young Jim. He was determined to give his mother the life of a true lady, and that takes gold, the King's gold. James swore to his mother he would get it. Gold, jewels, and every pretty toy she ever dreamed of having. James would conquer the world and take his rightful place in the society that rejected him. Then comes the memory that hurts still to this day, like a bruise that does not heal. The last night James Craddock could call himself a child. The night his mother died, in a ramshackle boarding house, a filthy, cold room. The landlady tells the doctor that to take whatever possessions the dead woman has as payment. Good riddance to her anyway. The landlady even told the doctor to take the boy as a servant, even though the doctor had no use for the boy, unless he was good at digging his own mother's grave. To which young James told the doctor no, because even in the sight of his mother's dead body, James considered himself still a gentleman. But the doctor taught him quickly not to put on airs, and slapped James hard across the jaw. Later on, as James shoveled the dirt from the ground that would become his mother's final resting place, he promised himself he would never be laid to rest in a pauper's grave. James would soon learn that there was plenty of gold around on the streets of London. Market days were the best, plenty of fools with open pockets, and James had the soft, sweet touch of a gentleman when he plucked their coin purses. One day, it was James's luck that the purse was full of gold and silver, not copper, and as he moved through the shadow of the gallows hill at Newgate Prison, on his way to the gypsy queen that protected him, he got the chills that he always got. As he crossed her hand with gold sovereigns in exchange for copper, she added something extra for James, a palm reading, his fortune, that he was right to fear the Tyburn tree, for she sees the hangman's noose waiting for him. But he will cheat the hangman and walk the earth long after her dust blows back to good Romanian soil. James recoils in disgust. A children's tale meant to scare, but the gypsy queen reminds him that he is still a child, and that born of noble blood, and he will die by noble blood. And until then, he will live as a thief, and long after his days, he will continue to hunt for the gold and silver that will do him no good by then. However, one day, he will live amongst those who stand in the castle, those he hates the most, and if they die, he will live again. For James, the old gypsy was crazy. At night, James haunted the taverns waiting for opportunity, or for a coachman to come along with a wild tale of ghosts and bandits along the King's Road. One night, one such coachman came. His client had been shot in the head and robbed, but he had been spared. The thrill of the story got James thinking, maybe the old gypsy was right. He would live as a thief, but more than a thief, as a gentleman of the road. That night, James set out on the road, starting at St. Paul's Cathedral and meandering into the forests. He knew that if he was to be successful, he would need a mentor, someone to teach him how to be a proper thief. James just didn't know that his masters would be born of a different realm. And in the moonlight, his name is called out from the trees. As James looks around, he finds himself surrounded by the apparitions of all the highwaymen that have come before him. They are there because James is destined to be the greatest of them all. And oddly, James is not afraid. He's too curious to be so. The ghost of Dick Turpin, the most infamous thief to ever ride the King's Highway, tells James he's one of them. Turpin hoists James into his saddle and tells him that they will give him the ride, and after that, he'll never fear a man or beast again. They rode all night, London to Edinburgh, and halfway back again, until James lost his fear, fell asleep, and wondered in his dreams if he would wake living or dead. When morning came, James awoke on the side of the road. Old Turpin had left him a few gifts. The first, a magnificent horse. Second, Turpin's own flintlock pistol still ripe with the odor of the grave. And lastly, James was left with the talent to ride, a master equestrian, ready for any obstacle. Gentleman Jim Craddock, legend of Old England, had been born. Gentleman Jim rode for years, taking whatever gold and jewels he cared to take, only stopping every now and again to give a gem or two to a pretty lass. However, it was one of these pretty ladies that was the end of James Craddock. He found this one to be the prettiest, and gave her a jewel or two in the hopes that she would give him hers. But she was untouched, and wanted to remain that way. And when James insisted, she fled. She fled to the king's men, who arrested him that very evening. For his crimes, James was sent to the gallows, sent dressed as the gentleman he was. As the crowds looked on, he cursed them. He swore he would return, that they had not seen the last of Gentleman James Craddock. As the noose tightened around his neck, he remembered the old gypsy's curse, and he prayed it prove true. James's journey while swinging on the noose was the most painful of all. He could hear the old gypsy's words echoing from the drums of hell so loudly that it drowned out the devil's own voice calling to him. And those last words of the gypsy, "Born of noble blood, you will die by noble blood, and until then, you will live as a thief. Long after your days, you will continue to hunt for the gold and silver that will do you no good by then. However, one day you will live amongst those who stand in the castle, those you hate the most, and if they die, you will live again." Then the fires burned down. James once again saw the world, however this time it was different. A world he thought never to see. And he sees what he has become, a ghost, but still a gentleman. And he still took his precious gems and gold, even though he no longer knew why. And this time, any who stood in his way would surely fall. And those who stand in the castle, the heroes of the day, the Justice Society of America in their mansion headquarters, the Justice League in their hall, the famous, the celebrated, the nobility of their time, the Amazonian princess, an elite billionaire from Gotham, master wizards and mystics, lanterns and geniuses, and all the rest of their friends. If they fall, James Craddock will live again. In Volume 4 of Hawkman from 2007, Gentleman Jim's story would undergo another change, one that would explain his immortality and his connection to Hawkman. In the 1800s, Gentleman Jim was never hanged in merry old London. Instead, James Craddock traveled to America, made his way to the Old West, where he encountered two gunslingers, Nighthawk and Cinnamon, who were actually the reincarnation of Hawkman and Hawkgirl. Gentleman Jim was trying to steal a golden sheriff's badge when Cinnamon caught him in the act. A scuffle ensued, and when Nighthawk entered the room, his jealous rage took over, believing that what he was seeing was James Craddock trying to force himself upon Cinnamon. Nighthawk took some rope and hung James Craddock that very day, only to learn moments later that it wasn't an assault, but merely Craddock trying to get away. Now, because it was an immortal soul that killed him without provocation, Craddock's soul is trapped on Earth, only ever to leave when Hawkman and Hawkgirls move on. So, that is why Hawkman is Gentleman Ghost's favorite target for entertainment. Thus ends the tragic tale of Gentleman Ghost James Craddock, a villain that may not be a villain in every sense of the word. I hope you enjoyed this look back into pop culture and comic book history. If you want more comic book fun right away, click on the thumbnail at the end of the video for our look back at the origin story and first ever appearance of Psycho Pirate, the most underused supervillain in all of DC Comics. You'll be glad you did. I thank you for watching. Until next time, remember, I'm still your reluctant gringo from somewhere south of the border. Salud and a huevo.